Hey, so the other day I realized something kind of wild. So I'm 56, I'm living alone, single with my cat, and I am not lonely. But at 41, I was in the exact same situation and I was very lonely. So I was kind of asking myself, why is it different between then and now? And I realized it was not my situation of being single and alone. It was the story that I was telling myself about what it meant to be single. And I know a lot of people tell themselves this story because it's a story that's been fed to us our entire lives, which is that if you are single, you are lonely by default. Like, being single means being lonely. But being lonely isn't a fact. It's a feeling. And being single, that's a fact. I'm single, that's a fact. But being lonely is a feeling, and that feeling is not required. So let me tell you how I got here. So society, family, friends, the media, everything in society really tells us that being single after, especially say 40 years old or so, is a failure. The other day I was at a funeral and I saw a man there that I haven't seen in a really long time, and he said, "Taz, oh, hi, how are you? You must be married with kids." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm single. I don't have any kids." And he made this face that was just this look of horror, like he just couldn't believe it. Like there just couldn't be anything worse than me being 56 and single. And I had to tell him, I said, "You know what? I'm fine. Don't worry about me." But, that's just really emblematic of what a lot of people think anyway. And then even in entertainment, like shows like The Diplomat, I was just watching this show the other day, and it's a great show, and it's actually pretty progressive in a lot of ways. But a man there told his ex-girlfriend, if she doesn't deal with her commitment issues, she's going to be alone for the rest of her life. And he said that in a way that was like, that would be horrible. That would be just a terrible thing. Mind you, this woman she's the chief of the CIA, so it's not like she has an empty life by any means. That just happened today. This wasn't 20 years ago when he said that. So these stories are still really prevailing in society today. So it's hard to shake. And when these stories get repeated over and over and over again, it becomes a fact in our head. So it's something you really have to unlearn. So let me go back to the time when I was 41 and single and felt very lonely. So I was dating at the time. I was about, I think, 3 or 4 years out of my divorce, and I had been dating a lot but couldn't really find the right person, and I didn't really feel any connections. If anyone who has done any dating recently knows it can be kind of soul crushing. And I remember watching this episode of Sex and the City, and Carrie said something like, "I'm lonely. The loneliness is palpable." And I thought, yes, that's how I feel. The loneliness, I can palpate my loneliness. And I just started crying there on the couch in my living room because of it. I just thought, I don't have a partner, and therefore something is missing and something is wrong with me. And I mistook that feeling for loneliness. Now I am 56 and I'm about 2 years out of my 9-year relationship, and my situation looks very similar to the one I was in when I was 41, single, living alone with my cat. Go ahead and make the cat lady jokes. I don't care. I love my cat, but I feel completely different. I love being alone. I love being able to do whatever I want all the time on my terms, whenever I want, without having to worry about somebody else's input. It's really all about me for the first time in my life. And that feels great. And I realized that loneliness was not about being alone. It was about the story that you tell yourself about being alone. Let me tell you why I think things changed, because it didn't really happen on purpose. It just sort of happened. So the first thing is just realizing that it is a story, that it's not a fact. It's just a story and a feeling that you might have, and that can change. I actually started resenting that story that was told to us all these years, because it doesn't have to be true. It can be true, but it doesn't have to be. And I was lonely in my relationships. I was lonely in my marriage. I was lonely in my 9-year relationship because I didn't feel seen. And at some point I felt really disconnected from my partner. And that can feel really, really lonely. Sometimes that kind of loneliness is even worse than being alone and feeling lonely, because you feel kind of trapped. So just being in a relationship doesn't guarantee that you won't be lonely. And then the second reason is that I am much more fulfilled in my life now than I was at 41. So when I was 41, I was working for an employer. I was an employee, earning a paycheck, trading my time for money. I didn't have a passion for that work, and I didn't feel fulfilled. When you are working full-time as an employee and you're not totally loving your job, it can just feel all-consuming, and it's hard to even make room in your life for hobbies or passions or anything else that you want to maybe explore, because you're so tired from that work. You know, you go to work all day, you work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and you come home at night and you're just exhausted. I had no time to do anything else. Maybe if you're lucky, you can carve out an hour to go to the gym or something like that. But most of the time I was just so tired. I came home, ate dinner, and just vegged out on the couch for the rest of the night watching TV. And then even on the weekends, it's like you got to run your errands that you weren't able to run during the week because you were working. So you really don't have a whole lot of time for yourself. And I think a lot of the times we look for a partner to try to fill that void in our life because we don't have anything else. We're not fulfilled by anything else. So we think a partner is going to fill that for us. And it doesn't all the time. Now I'm 56. I had left my job, started my own business, and it's a much different situation because I can choose my own hours. I can work however much I want or not work when I want. I can take vacation when I want. I have time for myself. And with my own business, I'm doing it for myself. I'm not working for somebody else. I'm working for myself. And that feels very different. It's much more energizing. And I have time to pursue passions like, for example, creating content for women over 50 who feel stuck and maybe want to reinvent themselves and start over. And that really fills me up. That gives me a sense of purpose, and I feel a lot of passion doing that. So that fills my life more than a partner can, because it's really for me. I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it for anybody else. And maybe some people think that's selfish, but I've been unselfish and selfless and giving myself to other people my whole life, and I'm ready to just focus on me. And that has given me so much more happiness than I've ever had in my life. So now that I'm filling that void in my life with things that I love doing, I don't need a partner to fill that void. And I think that's a really big difference. The Japanese have something called ikigai. And ikigai is basically a sense of purpose in your life. And that's something that they regard as crucial to living a good life. And your ikigai doesn't have to be super grand or complex. And then the last thing is that I have peace in my life, finally. And that peace is so much better than any kind of romantic love. I do whatever I want, and the place is to myself, and I can just keep it the way I want with no battles, and it's just very comforting to have myself and enjoy my own company and have things exactly the way I want in my own life. That's just very peaceful. And that is much, much more satisfying than being in a relationship for the sake of being in a relationship. I know that we're humans and humans are social creatures, but I don't think that social aspect needs to come from a romantic partner. We can have other people in our lives. Back in the days of early humans, we lived in tribes or small communities. There wasn't really a marriage per se. There may have been some romance going on, but it wasn't really a marriage. People shared in the responsibilities. They lived together. They shared child rearing. They shared food resources and things like hunting and gathering. The idea of marriage didn't come along for a while, and the idea of marriage based on romantic love didn't come around until about the late 18th century. So having a romantic partner for life is kind of a relatively new concept. And I think we've also proven that that doesn't always work. If it does work, that's wonderful, and I'm happy for anybody who has that and feels fulfilled. But that is not always going to be the case for everybody. And that's okay. It's okay to deviate from what society considers to be the norm. And I do believe that norm is shifting. You know, I have friends. I don't have a ton of friends. And the friends that I have, a lot of them have moved to other cities, or I moved away. So I don't get to see them all the time. I have one friend in the city where I live, and I see her 2 or 3 times a month. And, you know, I text my other friends, or we call each other and talk on the phone. And I do feel connection from that. And, you know, my ideal, because people a lot of times say, well, you don't want to die alone, do you? That's kind of the big thing that people always say. And I used to feel like that a lot. Like, I used to think about that a lot. But there's no guarantee that you won't die alone anyway. And honestly, my idea now of retirement and living out my final years is to live in a community with my friends. Maybe, you know, it would be great to have a duplex or a townhouse house, and my best friends live in the other side, or some friends live on the same block. That would be awesome. And we can all just get together when we want to, and we can rely on each other. That's something that I want. That's my dream. So if you are single and feeling lonely, and I know there's a lot of people out there who do feel this way, but ask yourself why. Are you really lonely, or are you just replaying a story in your head that you've been told all your life? And can you reframe that story? Maybe what you really need in your life is more of a sense of purpose, or some other kind of fulfillment. Maybe that fulfillment won't come from another person. Maybe you can start thinking about other things in your life that might bring you joy. And, you know, to do that, you have to try new things. And not all of them are gonna stick, let me tell you, because I remember being there and I tried, say, indoor rock climbing, and that was not really for me. You know, but I'm glad I tried it. I tried it and I realized not my thing, and I moved on and I did some other things. And now I feel like I've kind of found my groove. And it might take a while, but it's worth pursuing. But maybe stop outsourcing your sense of happiness to another person. So if you're over 50 and trying to reinvent yourself, or wanting to start over, or really just feel like you need a change in your life, I've got plenty of videos on my channel about that, so go check them out. I also have my Midlife Reinvention Starter Kit that's free, so you can download that in the link below. And as always, I'm gonna leave you with this. You're a bad mamma jamma.